Thank you so much. Oh, my Lord.
Thank you. And JJ thanks you, too, if any of that was for him. So we're going to do first of all, do you know that there's another theater watching at the same time? And we're on camera over there, I hope. So it's not just these people. Don't take their good reaction to be the whole deal. It could be booing in the other room. The other thing is we have enormous, we have to have energy because we don't have much time. They want to screen this movie, which I heard is good, again and again, all day long. And it looked really good. It looked really good. It's a great theater. I love this theater. Okay, so there's a lot of things we could talk about. And I'm going to ask you something, and if you don't want to answer it, just answer some completely different question.
Okay.
That'll be perfectly good. We've been hanging around a lot for 3 years, and I've been watching you direct this movie, and I'm really impressed. I think you have a future in this. I really do. As much as we've been together, as much time as we spent together, as much details we've gone over again and again, there are things that still remain a little mysterious to me. And I think that you have an unbelievable facility for blocking, for staging, for an enormously dynamic feeling in the movie. It's kinetic, it's exciting, but it doesn't seem ever frenetic. Tell me how you prepare as you go into a day. How much do you have a shot list? Do you have boards that you depend on? I know you've done some previs, but I didn't have a sense that you did a lot of previs. Tell me how you do that.
All right. Well, first of all, I can't thank you enough for showing up today and spending some of your weekend with us, and also for that remarkably generous reaction. So thank you. I'll never forget that. Lawrence Kasdan, who I just have to talk about you for a minute as if you're not here. Lawrence Kasdan is someone who, when Kathy Kennedy first approached and asked if I'd be interested in working on Star Wars, one of the enormous, crazy, surreal enticements was working with you. And the idea that we've gotten to work together, this last few years has been just full of the most fucking surreal experiences I've ever had in my life. And to be completely honest with you, to be here at the DGA, sitting with you, talking about a Star Wars movie that we got to make together is impossible. So I can't thank you enough for that. Thank you. The approach to doing scenes is, like I'm sure for all of you, it's always different. Depends what the scene is. It depends what the context is and what the intention is. Sometimes there are things that are, you go into it almost technically, where you think, okay, I know what it is we need to do, because there is a shot list, there is previs, there is, there are storyboards. But to me, the thing that is the most exciting is discovery, moment to moment on the set, and I know that previs is incredibly valuable, and storyboards or thumbnails are incredibly helpful, and shot lists are great. A lot of that for me is about just figuring out, the first approach. But it's like when you and I were working on the script together, you have to be open to the better idea, and the better idea is always right around the corner. And so, you have to figure out what's the way you're going to approach the scene now, always. And the now changes, and you get to the set and you look at the light, or you see an actor do something that you never would have anticipated, or someone would have added something in set dressing that you never would have considered. And so I try to approach every scene from the point of view of, like, the master I'm serving is that scene in that context, in that moment. What is the emotional punch? What is the thing that will make it either, funnier or more exciting? And one of the things that working with you reminded me, and it was very hard to separate the original conversations we had about story and character from the process of directing the movie. I thought that it always felt like one whole process. You reminded me again and again about trusting the audience, and trusting the characters. And it was that idea of restraint, saying less. You know, we would be working on something, and you know, I'd write a whole thing, and you know, Larry would be like, you know, you don't need that. It's too much. Just cut out. Just take it out. Just trust the audience. You know, and so I feel like it wasn't just in the. I'm going to do an impersonation of Larry like every 3 minutes. I can't help myself. I do it when I'm just with you, just hanging out. But I think that's the thing that is has been very helpful too about saying less. So I'll stop answering this question now.
You know, it's a great way to talk about it, and you know, and I've made films where it's smaller, and you get in the room and say, then the actor says, I don't really feel comfortable sitting here at this table, and you say, oh, okay, great. You know, why don't you cross during that? It's very different when you get on set and there are, you know, 500 extras, and there's a Star Killer base, and the transport has come in, and Oscar gets off the transport, and I've seen you do what I would do in a little dining room. You say, wait, let's change this whole thing. And well, it's kind of thrilling.
Well, thank you. But a lot of that comes from, it's a very weird thing, but this entire process has been, in some ways, an exercise in denial. In denying that Disney just spent $4 billion on the thing, and denying that, you know, fans of this thing were going to kill me if they didn't like it. You know, but denying that I was one of those fans that would kill myself. You know, denying the pressure of actors who were agreeing to put wardrobe on again 30-some years later, and who, you know, did really well with those early movies, and were trusting us and me with revisiting these characters. You know, these new actors who were coming in, who had never done anything, whose, you know, careers could have, you know, and would be defined in many ways by, of course, this debut, and also the trust that this enormous crew of, as you saw, thousands of people who spent time away from their families and working on this movie. I mean, it was an enormous thing, and so in a way, you get to the set. There's one shot where before they go on their big mission at the end, and Poe jumps down from the X-wing, and BB-8's going up, and he comes around, and Finn's coming over, and he pats his shoulder, and Finn walks off towards the Falcon. So we were on that set, and we were shooting Greenham Common in London, and you know, that shot wasn't a planned shot. And in fact, the weather was a little funky, and we were waiting for something to be ready to shoot. And it was just an opportunity. I mean, we did have these extras, we did have these actors, we were kind of waiting for something, and we have Colin Anderson, who's perhaps the most extraordinary Steadicam operator in history, and so we just threw it together. But what it reminded me of it was exactly what you're saying, which is making a small film, making a student film, doing an episode of, you know, Felicity, where it's like you've got a few people in the dorm room, and you go, oh, you know, we could try. But the thing that I kept finding again and again and again was we kept having those moments. And it was so weird if by allowing ourselves to deny, you know, holy shit, it's Star Wars. Holy God, what are we doing? By not being burdened by the opportunity, and understanding, you know, or letting that be the guiding principle. It was a weird thing that despite the scale of it, we were able to move with a kind of a speed and lightness, and it just allowed us to try things. Still sometimes scenes with a few people in a space, but that thing was, what you just mentioned, was real, and it was partly because I think we were all trying not to focus on the enormous responsibility of it, and more on the responsibility of telling a good story.
I think there's a lightness that it's infused in the movie because of that. You know, there isn't a sense of predetermination all the time. There's a kind of air in the filmmaking that I love. And when you are thinking about the next day, do you ever have trouble sleeping?
Last night I did a little bit. I was nervous about this. The honest answer is that sleep is not usually a problem for me. I could probably fall asleep anywhere pretty quickly, but sometimes this is what I'm haunted by. the things that you think are going to go really easily never do. And the things that you think are going to be really a bear often end up being things that just kind of happen. And so like sometimes when I know that, tomorrow's an easy one, I'm like, I lie in bed before I fall asleep. I just think, fuck. This is no way going to go the way I think it's going to go. And then you get there, and sometimes it's an actor who's like, I just don't know. You're like, or other times, you get there and you realize that the thing that you thought you were going to do, you're going to start here and get there. You go, I can't really do that with a Steadicam, or I can't really do the dolly, and the crane won't work. And you realize, the thing I thought was going to work just actually doesn't make sense. Or, one of the things that was really important, I know for us in this movie was very purposely going backwards to go forwards, and to embrace like literally a structure, finding a character in the desert, ending with a trench run, do something that felt very much a very purposeful step backwards in order to tell a brand new story with brand new characters. And clarity of story was really important. There's so many movies, some of which I find wildly entertaining and love, but that have very confusing plot lines. And I kind of love those things, but this one I knew couldn't be that. And I inspired by this opportunity to do this movie, working with you and this amazing crew, I tried to stretch a little bit and apply different. It was a different master to serve. And knowing that Star Wars is a kids movie without being a kids movie, I didn't want it to be too convoluted. So a lot of it was like about clarity, just visual clarity, and knowing where you were going, knowing that Starkiller Base was always off to the right, knowing that, the lines of action and making sure that things felt consistent. So sometimes I'd show up on set, and I'd have an intention, and then I'd realize that it wasn't quite working for what this movie required. So to answer your question, it's like the things that were sometimes simple ended up being more tricky, and the complications, were things that I couldn't really anticipate, but I would know in advance if I think that something's going to go very easily, it probably won't.
And do you find that, and this comes up for me all the time, and I think for everybody who does this, which is, do you find that your perceptions are not always correct? That the day you thought, you get the take, that's fantastic, we'll never do better than that, that's great, you get in dailies, it sucks.
Yes.
And the thing you thought sucked is really good.
Yeah. Well, that part doesn't happen, but no. But it's amazing. Like, I will, we'll go through something and do, 9 or 10 takes, and we don't usually do much more than that. I mean, there was a point where 13 was our, and like I knew it was a thing when, we did a take, and I said, that's it, let's move on, and Dan Mindel, DP, collected some money. And it was because apparently that was take 13, and that's all I've been doing for like 4 weeks is take 13. But often I was sit in the editing room with Mary Jo and Mary Ann, the editors, watching something, and take 1 was great, and take 2 was less great, and take 3 was less great, and take 4, I'm like, what the hell was my problem? Like, take 1, she killed it. That was an amazing performance, and I kept like pushing her to make it worse. Like, keep going, you're almost bad. Keep going. It's.
You started by directing in television, but when you went into features, and this is only your 5th feature, but you started even with an enormous picture with Mission Impossible, and then you've done basically big pictures. Super 8's a little different, but what did you find different aside from the weight of the franchise? Aside from the history of this thing, did you find this to be a different experience for you than the last Star Trek, the Star Trek before?
I gotta say, because it's Star Wars, from the very first conversation with Kathy through this moment, it's been so different on every level, and part of it is the responsibility that I feel, having fallen in love with what George Lucas created. When I was 10, I mean, I went to go see that movie like many of you, and was just, I felt like the horizons expanded, not just in terms of cinema, but life. It was this kind of reaffirming thrill ride that, like, it wasn't just fun. It was meaningful. It was spiritual. It was beautiful. It was moving. The adventure, the comedy, the design, the casting, the plot line, the music, the sound effects, the techniques to tell the story visually. It was the first movie I'd seen as a kid where I didn't know how they did it. I mean, up to that point, I'd started making movies, when I was 8, and like, Super 8 movies, and so I knew, I could see that was a matte painting. I was one of many 8-year-olds that were fans of Albert Whitlock in my school. My friends were like, "The fuck are you talking about?" But I like I'm sure like many of you, I knew what a matte painting or a miniature was. I knew how they did certain things. Star Wars, I didn't know how they did anything. Like I couldn't understand it. It was like the most amazing thing. But that wasn't even the best part. It was that it was funny and it had this great, So from the very beginning, this idea of continuing this saga, being a part of continuing this saga, was such a thrill. And from working with you, having the every resource at our disposal, having a scale. One of the things I knew very early on was that feeling I had watching Star Wars, where you had these 2 droids walking in the deserts of Tatooine. It was real, and it was real because it was real. It happened to be Tunisia, but there were these, Kenny Baker and Anthony Daniels were in their costumes on a practical set, and it was as real as anything in Lawrence of Arabia. It was just it happened to be a movie that some people say is sci-fi, but is really more of a fantasy than science fiction. And the idea that we could maybe bring that feeling back was hugely exciting to me. And so we decided very early on, we're going to travel as much as we could, build as many sets as we can. On the Pinewood back lot, we built these enormous exterior sets. We built these enormous interior sets. That whole fight in the snow was a massive set, the forest at the end. But then like some of the sets that even sort of look like they're sets, like the forest where she meets up with BB-8, was entirely practical. I mean, all of that, the ray of God light coming down was just sunlight that was there because it had just rained. So it was an amazing thing to get to shoot in Abu Dhabi and get to shoot on Skellig Michael in Ireland, and all this stuff that we were getting to do. The people with whom I was working, it was like I felt like we were inheriting this thing that George had created that was impossible, and it was so precious, and yet the only way we could do our job was to not be precious about it. So it was a very strange process of inheriting something that we all loved. I mean, people on the crew, it was an amazing thing. Many had family members who had worked on the original trilogy, and so they were bringing this kind of like passion. And anyone who didn't have family who worked on it had stories about Star Wars that were as important. So the entire crew was like in this place of, desperately wanting to do their emotions proud. It's a strange thing. They wanted to do something that was going to, continue this feeling that they all felt. So to a person on the crew, they would outdo themselves every day. It's not to say that the crews on the projects I've worked on haven't been extraordinary. I feel lucky to have worked with everyone I've worked with, except for 2 people. But but truly though, the experience on this was never like anything else. I could go on and on and on about all these different ways that's true, but it really is. And I'm just happy as when a movie comes out that there are going to be people who don't like what you do, and that always is going to happen, of course. What you pray is that there's going to be someone who does. And what I'm so happy about is that that there are kids who I've been hearing about through friends who've seen this movie and are all excited, and girls who are dressing up like Rey, and the idea that there's, there were always strong women in Star Wars, but the idea that there's one at the center now is so exciting to me. And I just, well, that was Kathy Kennedy when we first talked about it. She said, we're talking about the idea of having a female Jedi, and I'd written some shows, Felicity and Alias, that had female characters at the center, and the idea of a female Jedi was, for some reason I thought, oh my God, there's a 19-year-old kid out there who doesn't know who the hell Luke Skywalker is necessarily, who doesn't know what's real, what's not, who's just this, she doesn't even know she's living in Star Wars. And what happens if that is our, lead character? And it was just really, I don't know, from the very, very beginning, I know it's an endless answer, but from the very beginning, this experience was somehow, in some very strange way, thanks to what George created, remarkable and very, very special.
Very. And I remember sitting very early in the production, sitting on the set and turning to each other and saying, you know, we already won on this one. You know, things can go horribly wrong. People can hate the movie. You know, there can be disasters. But the truth is, we were sitting there on the sets. Everyone was costumed. We were surrounded by 1,000 brilliant collaborators. And we had to say, you have to do that at some point and say, we already got lucky. We already been blessed.
I felt that way. This is going to be sycophantic, but it's true. I felt that way before production started, having gotten to work with you. That you know, I remember thinking, if this plug gets pulled, if something goes wrong, if it doesn't happen, whatever, it was already that. But I do feel that way about this experience. And you know, Neil Scanlon, who did the creature department, he was literally going into retirement. He was done, and we called to say, would you be interested in working on Star Wars? And you know, he was like, oh, okay. And and I will tell you, like for that one shot, that long shot that comes into the castle, and that red robot goes by. You know, that red robot was there. It was a woman on stilts. You know, and she goes by, and then you go up to the castle, and you know, it tilts up and comes back down, and then it goes in. You know, there were 3 separate shots, but we blended them all. But when you go in, you know, every creature in that room was real. They were all. That was a practical shot entirely. Until it ends on Maz, and Maz was a CG character, played by Lupita Nyong'o. And what was amazing was that you know, ILM had to match everything else around it, and that was the thing that was so cool about you know, having Neil on the movie, was that you know, he and his team, which were an unbelievable group of craftspeople, they made these, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of these incredible creatures, and you know, you couldn't help but look at each one of them and think, oh my God, this is amazing. I remember we were shooting that scene, it felt like this is what it must be like to shoot a Muppet movie. We had all these puppeteers, you know, hidden under tables, that, you know, that big giant guy, you know, that like evil woman, her name's Bazina Tall, she whispers, you know, she reports on the droid to the First Order. You know, he was there, 5 people operating him. That big creature at the trough, when John Boyega goes to drink the water, that was there. That was you know, that was 5 guys in this ridiculous suit in the 130-degree heat in Abu Dhabi. 4 died that day. No, they didn't die. They were literally under this, you know, and in between every take, they would shove this air conditioning tube up its ass to. It was really ridiculous to see, but having all this stuff practically there every time there was something like that. The whole crew, and of course the cast, getting to interact with these amazing puppeteered creatures, got to have the experience of being in Star Wars, as opposed to a fix-it-in-the-mix thing, which happens all the time. And I know that, you know, George gets a lot of grief for a kind of green screen, blue screen thing, and I think that it must be said that we wouldn't have been able to do nearly any of the visual effects that we did in this movie had he not broken every rule that he did to allow for these visual effects to be discovered and used. So it was, for me, that, you know, a great approach to say, okay, we can do anything. We have the technology to do so, but what should we do? And what would they have done? And to approach almost everything from a point of view of, you know, what's the sort of the most down and dirty way to do it? And then how can we use technology as necessary? Because, of course, there are more visual effects shots in this movie than in any Star Wars movie prior, and amazing visual effects work. But a lot of the CG was to remove things, remove puppeteers and rigs and wires and things.
I just want to break from you know, this movie's doing okay. And it was a really good experience. It was fun. But, you know, everybody here has, you know, a lifetime to live, a career to live. And what the reality of that career, at least from my experience, is that there's up and down, and that there are moments when you just think, I'm finished. This was it. I gave everything I had, and it amounted to nothing. That we got so close to being able to do this movie, and then it was ripped away from us. Or we're in the middle of the movie, and I'm screwing it up. Can you just address what that's like? Because we're talking about a very successful weekend you're having here, but it hasn't always been like this. It isn't always like this. And you've been a very successful guy, but you know that that's not about the final box office tallies ever. It's about your feeling of, did you achieve what you wanted to achieve?
Well, there have been times when, you know, I've worked on something that, well, first of all, we all take jobs we have to take, you know, because we have to, whether it's to, you know, survive, whether it's a friend who's desperately, you know, needs something or needs help with something. There are all sorts of reasons why we do certain jobs. But to me, the thing that I've, you know, I've learned again and again and again, and I will continue to learn this, is, you know, things I should have done or should have said, not being strong enough to say, no, we're not ready, I don't have this yet, I don't have the answer. You know, on the set, I always try to do everything I can to make everyone feel like, you know, we're all doing this together, because that's what's real. And if I don't have the answer to something, I try to find it as soon as I can. I you know, hopefully, and I've been very lucky to work with people who will and do help out with the answer that I would never be able to come up with, you know, again and again and again. But, you know, I would so much rather have worked on something that I thought I did my best and gave my all, and it failed, and know what I did, and think, you know, I did then have something be successful or work that I thought I kind of phoned it in. And there have been times when I've said yes to things that I don't think I should have, and there have been times when I haven't been able to come up with the answer, and I think, what, you know, how could I have not made that better or helped out in a more significant way? You know, there are certain things that have been very meaningful. There's you know, it just occurs to me, there's a pilot that we did years ago that was this beautiful pilot written by Rafe Iglesias and Tom Schulman about cancer doctors. And we did it for HBO, and it was the pilot that I directed. And you know, this was a very personal story for Rafe, and it was a really, you know, emotional story, and it meant a lot to me because of him. And this was one of those things where I was like, I did my best, and it didn't go forward. And you know, there are times when, like, that to me is a greater failure than a movie that you know, that comes out and it doesn't do a number that people think. And just as I'm truly thrilled that Force Awakens is doing well, and you know, I'm the pride I feel is simply through association of the people who worked on this movie, far more than the success of the movie. And I you know, I'm so grateful that you know, people seem to be liking it. But I'm more gratified by having gotten to be part of a group of people that I could never have imagined, and worked in a way that I had never seen before.
I can vouch. The guy's really a good guy. And you know, you when you're running an army of people, it's very easy to get impatient, get frustrated, and I never saw it. I never saw the guy speak an unkind word to anyone, and to me, that is an equal virtue to any other virtue in this movie. He is a hell of a guy.
I will say one thing, and I don't know, I mean, this may or may not be of use to you, but it's something that I do every project, and it's been helpful, which is kind of setting the moral compass a little bit at the very beginning of production, and getting all the heads of the department together at the very beginning, and not just having a production meeting, but literally saying what we're doing is, you know, and we did this like almost verbatim on this movie, to say what we're doing here is to some people sacred, but it's just a movie. And yet, what we have to treat this, obviously, you know, as importantly as I know that we are, as important as we make a movie that we are proud of and we love, that this experience needs to be something of import. That the way we treat each other, and it's just the cardinal rule, you know, treat others the way you want to be treated, and be there for other people. And it's something that, you know, it's easy to get caught up. It's easy to get freaked out by how many, you know, hours or minutes you have left, or where the sunlight's going, or what's not working out, or a performance you can't get, or any number of things that we all know, you know, happens on any given day. But as short as anyone's temper may be, or as important as a moment may be to get, because it's the last day on the set or whatever the hell it is, when you respect each other, it's amazing what gets done. There was a day we were shooting in that Puzzlewood, which was the forest I was mentioning earlier, that looks fanciful and like a set, but it wasn't. And we had to like trudge through this crazy, these enormous tree roots and things, and it was just a very uneven terrain, and it was a real pain in the ass. But these, people were, carrying enormous, material across and boxes and track and all sorts of things. And one of the crew members was saying how, they would do anything for me in this movie. And it wasn't because of any other reason than we were all having a really good time. We were all respecting each other. And I heard about that and I went over to him. I gave him this huge hug because it was like, that's how I felt for him. Like I would do anything. If he told me he needed something, like it was this wonderful familial thing. And I know that it sounds sort of Pollyanna-ish and it's all, flowers and cookies, but it's not that at all. It's a lot of fucking hard work. But what I've found is that when you say early on, yes, this is high stakes. Yes, this is really important. When you say respect each other as much as you can, it's the obvious thing, the most obvious thing ever. But when you say it and you see people kind of get it, and then you do it. It's amazing how that works. And one other thing I'll say is that obviously whoever's number one on the call sheet sets the tone, no matter who's directing a lot of the times. And Harrison Ford, who of course makes it look so easy, worked his ass off and was so game and hungry to do great on this movie. And he not only was he great in the film, I think, but what was so cool is he was demonstrating for these new, young, wildly intimidating actors what it is to show grace. And that was amazing to watch.
I'm afraid that's all the time we've got. I thank J.J. Abrams. Thank you for coming here today.
Thank you all so much. Thank you.